So we get an idea that it's working correctly. I'm going to immediately skip ahead to, because that's another thing we're not going to have to modify too much. I'm going to say go to out white water, or just, yeah, out white water. Make that a lovely periwinkle. Similar style here, we need to do adopt import fields. And what are we importing? Well, we're going to import from the whitewater network. We want to get it from the whitewater node. And all we want, is the particles that it actually made. So choose that, press plus, and you can say like geometry. And hopefully, there we go, we can see our result. It's even, color coded, as I was saying. And more importantly, we have these bubble, foam, and spray attributes, which we'll be able to use to filter out. The rest of these points here are the repellent things, which we talk about again in Fluids 2 quite a bit. They're the ones that will break up the foam. They'll basically they'll exude a force going outwards, and for the foam that's resting there, it'll kind of move it apart from each other. So we're gonna work with these particles in a moment, but for now, let's just set up the actual caching for this. Yet another caching thing. I'm gonna go steal this interior one. But if you do steal the interior one, or one like it, this time we don't want it to do the pack disk primitive. We're never gonna render this thing directly. Go over to our out area. The whitewater is dependent on the original simulation, the original liquid simulation. So, the compressed files. So I'm going to put this here like so. And let's cache it. And I'm already going to tell you we are going to make a change to it after we cache it. So we will have to end up recaching. If you want to wait, you can. Otherwise, I'm going to cache it now and show you what we're going to change about it. Well, I just cached that whole thing and realized that I was recaching the surface again. Forgot to actually update this thing to be the whitewater. Oops. Okay, well, do it again. All right, so we finished that cache there now, and it's actually worked correctly. And you can see, look at that. We can see the repellents breaking up the foam in the back there. We can see all of this extra spray that we have coming out now. We have various ways we could visualize this. We could use the depth. Click on that, and you can see that's something, I guess. If your viewport is looking very light, as I've had happen in the past, or just in general, whenever you have a viewport problem, just remember, close the scene view and make a new one for the new pane type viewers scene view. But assuming your thing still looks okay, there it is. We might also visualize by spray. Spray is, whenever the particles have left the surface and are now in essentially the air. So they'll get a value from 0 to 1 to say how airborne they are. Alternatively, there's the bubbles, which is when they are, of course, below the surface and they're moved completely by the velocity of the liquid. And then there's the foam, where they're resting on the surface and are kind of sliding along the surface a little bit. It's still moved by the surface, but not maybe as much as the bubbles are. They're also trying to, rest on the surface and kind of dissolve a little bit based off of the various erosion controls. Again, we talk about that in Fluids 2 quite a bit, and we're not going to talk about that much now because the defaults are pretty good. So I'm going to make a flipbook of this so we can evaluate it a little bit more, and we just might even tweak it. Let's see. All right, and this is what we came up with. And it's pretty cool. The red ones are, of course, the ones that are considered the most to be acting like spray. And you can see how they become kind of ballistic a little bit, where they are thrown up into the air and they kind of just fall straight down. They don't move, certainly not like the foam in the back here. So one thing we can do, perhaps to improve this a little bit, is to target that spray area and kind of have it be affected more by the air. While they are moving ballistically and they are taking a little bit of time to fall back down to earth, I think that this can be improved upon by using the pop wind DOP. You know, back in the day, the particle operators were their own thing, so they still have pop in the name, but essentially they're just regular DOPs now. So if you fly into the whitewater here, we have various particle inputs, or rather this one in particular for particle forces. We'll put a pop wind DOP down there, connect it, and you know, this would be your job as an artist and day to day would be fiddling endlessly with this pop wind to get it just right. I think the main takeaways here is that I want to feel the wind. I want to feel the air resistance of the particles separating from the main fluid body. So while I am reducing the air resistance, 0.5 air resistance is quite a bit of air resistance. So it's going to lose a lot of velocity. Which particles should be affected by this? Well, anytime the spray is, let's say, greater than 0.5, I don't know, let's just do all the spray. So anytime the spray has any value, be affected by the air, so be slowed down by it. And also we'll say, we'll add some breakup to it too. We'll have the wind push it around a little bit. So give it some amplitude, or else it's going to do nothing. Let's have it be fairly large swirls of air. And the pulse length can stay 1. I'm going to make it be 0.5. That just means that it's going to cycle through the noise pattern faster. We probably won't notice one way or another. But I definitely want to have the roughness go up quite a bit. These particles really shouldn't be moving too much as one unit. I'm just picturing a fairly chaotic air. I mean, the liquid itself will be whipping the air up into some turbulence anyway. If we wanted to be really accurate about this, we could run an entire pyro sim on top of this, or at least a sim that takes the liquid, the waves moving as an input, to move the velocity field, the air, around. And then we just have a really interesting velocity field to affect our particles. People definitely do that for particularly angry, noisy seas where we need to see particulate sprays blowing off the tops of waves. That would be a very good thing to do. We don't need to do that here, so we're going to approximate that pretty well with a turbulent noise that's just not based off of the waves, but is generating its own, essentially. So I'm just going to go ahead and say, let's just cache it again, and then maybe we'll see those particles falling back down a little bit slower and maybe kind of moving on their own. Just again, to give it a different feel than the underlying fluid sim.